Welcome to the second episode of Sky Nodes. This is part two of our discussion around the moon's nodes. Part three is coming soon. Thanks for joining us and welcome if you're new. Enjoy.
So where do we want to start? Where do we want to
So,
talk about?
when we last met, we wanted to go over a few of the types of perspectives on the moon's nodes. And just as a refresher, the nodes are where, the orbit of the moon and the orbit of the sun intersect. So,
One of the I think where I've probably learned the most about a more traditional look at the nodes has been through Sphere and Sundry, Caitlin
oh,
Kopar
nice.
and
Yeah,
Austin. Yeah. And they have so many resources in terms of remediations. And so looking at the eclipse remediations and the nodal remediations, and that, the node color is black.
yeah,
In honor. I didn't do it on purpose. I just
right.
realized it now. Yeah. And it's always
That's
about
great.
purifying, getting rid of, and it's never are you trying to increase anything with the
Right,
nodes. And even if there is a positive side to the nodes, they're so wild and uncontrollable that
right,
you don't want to tap into that
right,
energy,
right.
right? From a magical point of view.
Yeah,
And so, sort of reading through the remediations and the magic of it can
yeah.
give you a really good sense of
That's so cool.
sort of the energy that has been attached to the nodal axis
Yeah.
through through traditional astrology. I have to say I probably learned the most through reading Caitlin's stuff when it comes to that, for sure.
That's very cool. I'll have to
She's a
check it out.
wealth of information. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then, I have to admit, I didn't venture very far from Judith Hill when it came to the medical side of things. Um, I have been lucky enough in terms of medical astrology to learn from um, some medieval astrology and some, William Morris does all of the astrologies. And so anything I learned from him from the nodes, I'm not quite sure where it's coming from
Right,
because he's
right,
seen
right, right.
all of it.
Yeah.
Um, and then also Judith. And, she also has studied Vedic astrology as well.
Hmm.
So her um, explanation of them and the way she looks at them is going to have that flavor.
Yeah.
And so she talks about, I have lots of notes. So
Yeah.
the Rahu is the excess. There's too
Hmm.
much, like you said. And she actually connects the idea of Cancer to the North Node,
Yes.
too
Yeah.
much in the sign, whatever organ the sign rules. If you
Wow.
have that planet or that sign and it's attached to the North Node, you're going to have too much of it, and you have to watch out for that. Um, she says, so Rahu can indicate an area where there might be an overindulgence or
Hmm.
health issues due to excess. She says that the point where cosmic energy enters and it can point to unconventional health problems are
Hmm.
those that are difficult to diagnose.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then K2 is also this point of release and where energy exits.
Yeah.
And really in that uncontrolled sort of way, right? And she actually considers it one of the three major pathology points.
Wow.
So the South Node, Mars, and Saturn are the three
Okay.
main pathology in her view for with medical astrology or
And
health
would you use
astrology.
that to diagnose? Is that kind of, I mean, I don't even know if one diagnoses in medical astrology, but those 3 points of pathology, I assume, have a counter in a positive, like the three strengths or something like that. Are they used to find a way to assist in the condition of the person?
Yeah, I feel like, whenever you're looking at the medical astrology, you're looking for the where the strengths and the weaknesses are,
Yeah.
right? And
Okay.
so um the south node is going to show where there's a falling out of energy,
Yeah.
right? And so if you have a planet there, and I think as she describes it, if you have a planet that's not in great shape and
Ah,
it's conjunct the south node, you're going to have problems with whatever that planet is ruling,
got it.
you know?
Yeah.
I know that when I took one of her medical astrology classes, we had to do a homework assignment with the nodes.
Mm,
And I looked at my husband's chart, and he had 3/4 of the things that she listed
right,
in terms of health issues
right.
connected with the nodes and the planets involved. So it was a little bit spooky, to be honest, but it was very telling, very, very, very telling.
I find it really interesting. And, in terms of health support, I find this is just my 2 cents. I usually have to work with an allopathic, a regular doctor, a naturopath, and then somebody who does all of the wackadoo modalities. And I just say that more from an outside reflection than inside. I find that people who understand or who can address things from the inside can make good decisions that can come back to the allopathic or to the naturopath. And so the idea that you would also be able to kind of rely on astrology to give you this, I have not studied it enough, even though I know about Kira Sutherland's great work, and of course Judith Hill's great work, and I know there's a bunch of other folks. Lee Lehman, right? She does
Lee
some
Layman, yeah.
Lehman, right? So, but yeah, thinking of that as another kind of supplemental place to look into ways to triangulate on your care. It's just really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and even, from all of those perspectives, if you find the South Node in your chart, it is the way I've seen it, and it's been confirmed when I've looked at these modalities, that wherever you have the South Node is to be careful not to put too much energy there, because it just falls away,
Yeah.
right? I actually had a client recently who with this great session, and then she asked a question at the end about looking back in her life to see an event in the astrology of it.
Hmm.
So it was something that we very quick, just a short sporadic look, and it was a really tragic event, but to look at it from outside and see the astrology of it,
Hmm.
they lost their home
Wow.
to a fire, and in both things that we were looking at, like the transiting South Node was conjunct Mars, and Mars was conjunct the natal South Node
Yeah. Wow.
in the 4th house of home and the
Wow.
2nd house of belongings.
Wow.
And just so that idea of losing, right?
Yeah.
Of things falling away,
Yes.
was just, yeah, it was very wow. And there was no fire signs involved. Like it was just the planet in charge of fire
Hmm.
connecting to that South Node, which I believe, I don't remember which one it was natally. I'm not going to try to commit to anything,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just like I don't know what I expected to see, but it was quite literal, and it was
Yeah.
definitely, it was Mars to the nodes in both cases.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just, for people who are watching or listening, for
Yeah.
themselves to see where that South Node sits, and to see if that's an area of life where, your vital force, as Judith would say,
Right.
has been drained,
Yes.
and to just be cognizant of that, and,
Yeah.
learn how to moderate. I mean, for me, it's 7th house. That's client work, that's partnerships, that's any one-to-one thing that you have going on, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it is a place where you can waste a lot of time and energy, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine
Yes.
is on my ascendant conjunct Mercury and Neptune. And it definitely has been a fascinating journey to get here.
And
Yeah,
you and I are opposite,
that's
because
right.
you have your South Node on your ascendant, and I have my North Node on my ascendant.
That's right. That's right.
So,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
there's
my
just,
previous partner had that. We had
ah,
reversed placements, but
interesting.
we were born 2 weeks apart, so it was roughly the same chart. So that was also interesting. I mean, I think about, tragic events and the markers for them, or anything you're uncomfortable with. I remember gifting an astrology reading that did not surface the things that that person was worried about. And so they kind of didn't feel the benefit of it, didn't sort of see what it would do. And I think that's why I just, I know I keep saying it. I love astrology. I could eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I do not need anybody around who does not want astrology. So not that I don't need them around. I don't need them when I'm talking about astrology. And so I think about how do you run into this? And I know it's a little bit of a tangent, getting folks into the condition where they can ask good questions. Do you ever have that kind of, there's a trope in astrology that people are going to ask, can I fall in love? And to the entire world, yes, come on, everybody's so dang cute. And then can I get rich? And the way that resources are pointed out in astrology, a lot of this stuff I'm trying to get to is common sense, right? Can you be an astronaut? Have you been training to be an astronaut? Can you have a really good relationship? Have you had really good relationships, kind of thing? So to get like that real question, right? Like to the real obstacles or to the less than obvious stuff, I often find that I'm waiting to hear, the anecdote or the story that a client would have, where that triangulation in particular would be helpful. My opinion, what I can see in the chart, and their participation. That becomes something really magical with the right questions. So anyway, I was just curious if you run into that.
It's what I think one of the things that keeps my Mercury Uranus conjunction entertained
Yeah.
is, that every session is so different.
Yeah.
And even when I am always kind of blown away because always, when I get sort of a clump of clients at one time, there are similarities
Right.
between things that are always, right? And it's always this confirmation that astrology works because it's just so noticeable. It's just bizarre, really, if you're
Right.
if you're looking at it from outside that, seeing the magic of everything, that how it moves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if somebody, when I find, when we're talking about the right question, I find if somebody's really hell-bent and wanting to know about their love life, let's say,
Right.
as an
Right.
example, okay? And that's just not what's lit up. That's just not where the
Right.
energy is. And if they don't want to hear anything else, the right question is never going to be asked.
You're right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I record the session.
Yeah.
Because one day, hopefully, you're going to want to revisit this.
Yeah.
And see what you missed.
Yeah.
In terms of the conversation.
Yeah.
But and my favorite is always when somebody's like, I just want to know about astrology and my chart.
Yeah.
And because to me, that's where often the richest and naturally guided conversations come from.
Yes.
Even just with you and I, trying to decide what we're going to do in the podcast. It's like as long as you're always going with a natural flow, the right questions will get answered, right?
Yes. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And so, I do plan a lot for my session.
Of
I take a
course.
lot of notes, and it's cut down a lot.
Yes, of course.
Many.
Yeah.
I'll probably never stop doing that. I'm never going to stop being a Virgo. So,
Right.
But letting the conversation just happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And giving moments to sort of process the information. I think that if you just let the situation be as natural as possible, then you're opening the door for the right questions, or the most helpful information.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm betraying my my biases a little bit, like what I have used astrology for is to identify what truly makes me happy, outside of what is societally appropriate, and in some cases that's led to some pretty traditional behavior, and in some cases it has not. And so in my um, exuberance, as a Sagittarius, I would love that for everyone, right? Like I would love for everybody to kind of have that sense of like, oh my God, it's okay to be me. Oh my God, this is great. And oh, look, here's all the stuff that I get to go explore. Holy crap, that's a lot, which has been my general like dun 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 dun, dun Sagittarian approach, and so I can put that bias aside when I think about my clients generally, you know, I'm usually blown away by my clients, and I'm usually looking for um, corroboration for stuff that they already know, or uh, new things that may not be so apparent that might be coming down the pike, So more so than the right question, it is almost a question of how do you handle it when folks just want to know if they're going to fall in love or get rich. And I think we all know you're kind to them and you do the good work, and they've got a recording afterwards to listen to.
Yeah. Well, and the thing, and I remember this being made really clear when I was taking courses through Kepler. And, talking about, we use famous people's charts because generally a certain level of success comes with things in the chart that an average person doesn't have in their chart and won't experience,
Right.
And so, information about their lives is available, all of these things, but also these signatures aren't generally a part of the average person, right?
Down the line, I would love to go over the Gauquelin material for the
Oh, cool.
sports quadrants. I think that would be really fun. But
Very cool.
yeah, that's a really good, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like often when people are seeking out something like astrology, it's the contradictions in themselves, which are very apparent when we look at a chart, that they're befuddled by, frustrated
Yes.
with, want more information about,
Right.
And so back to talking about the nodes,
Mhm.
one of my favorite conversations I had was with the client who had all of this fear and terror, horrible nightmares, and had never had any life experience to
Wow.
support
Wow.
it. And yet that story was very apparent in this nodal
Wow.
activity she had in her natal chart.
Hmm.
And I just love how, the universe provides for us, because I had the contrast with a client like a week before
Oh,
who had lived through a lot of the things
yes.
that with the same signature, with
Yeah.
it was Mars, Pluto, and then the nodes, but I really don't remember anything
Yeah.
beyond that.
Yeah.
It just the starkness and their life experience.
I wonder
And
what the this, I am so sorry. I'm
no,
so
that's okay.
well, when you hear it, let's hear if you say that again. I wonder if there's a way to do an astrology HIPAA. Do you know what I mean? So
No.
HIPAA is the American set of laws that means if I am a doctor, I can't talk about your case with anyone. And
Mm.
I can't even claim you as a client.
Ah.
I can't remember what the initials stand for, but when I worked briefly at a cancer care alliance, I had to study that because I couldn't go running up to somebody and going, "You're here, this is so cool," and I certainly couldn't do that at the grocery store if I saw them. Just sort of natural constraints to preserve anonymity. And the reason why I was compelled to say that is because you were saying, I can't remember the rest of the nodes, and the rest of the configuration, Mars, Pluto nodes. And I was like, that's perfect. Stop there. It's none of our business.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. yeah, and the details don't even really matter,
Yeah.
right? Like those are the traumatic planet
Yeah.
potentials
Yeah.
connected to that intense energy around the nodes, right? So
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter how it was configured.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's always interesting to me that there is this almost like a cellular memory when we're talking about the nodes,
I like
you know?
that. I like that.
Yeah.
And you know, again, referring back to the Jeff Green video, and there's plenty of work to sort of support this. Uranus being the octave, the higher octave of Mercury, right? I think that's esoteric astrology, which I don't think we have addressed yet, but um, the higher octave of Mercury, and therefore Mercury is short-term memory and Uranus is long-term memory. And then you start to talk about the collective and talk about it as the modern ruler of Aquarius, right? And, you know, its impact these days, traveling fairly close to Jupiter in an Earth sign that's, I'm sure, ready to shuffle it off, you know, get off of me. But that long memory, cellular memory, family traditions, family stories. I've heard a lot of stories, you know, growing up I think it mostly happened in the 80s, hearing about the children of folks who um, the children of folks who had been in the Holocaust and their stories. Like, I don't get to drive a Volkswagen because Hitler made that, you know, for the common people. And I don't get to watch this show, or, you know, here's where my family kind of skitzes out. And that transition at the beginning of the century from, what was it called? Shell shock, right? Like after World War One. And then it became like slowly PTSD, and like our understanding of trauma really has changed. And then you add on to it, and I think we've mentioned it before, where we have miraculous healing, you know, right in front of my house. I live, you know, not in some really urban area. I don't know why that would make a difference. Somebody rode by or ran by with one of those really cool prosthetic running legs. And we couldn't figure out if we have more than one, you know, neighbor who has that condition. And so there's a different kind of trauma, right? Physical trauma that we're experiencing more because of traumatic brain injuries being more rescuable, survivable, but having intense impact after. So I think about all of that with Uranus. It would be really interesting to think about. For me, it's natural to assume with a long memory, you come up with the grudges, you come up with the things that hurt you. It's also quite lovely when you come up with the things that create peace and harmony and civilization. I'm going to go to one other point and then I'm going to come back. The other point is, you know, I was looking up for a while who would be the goddess of keeping your house clean, you know, who would be in charge of that and what would that mean. And when I first came across it, the names were more so related to law and order, which is one way you could look at it, or civilization. And that way I found really exciting, because it was sort of the sense of, we can't do anything unless things are set up for us. So if the kitchen's clean, then in the morning we get to have breakfast and it's super easy. And this is not, I really do like being clean, but I think people have a lot of nerve judging people who are dirty, because people get to do whatever the heck they want. If it doesn't bother them, keep it going. But for me, it is something to wake up to things that are prepared. And I often say, even if I'm the one who has like slaved away to do it, that it feels like pixies have done it. If I walk into a room and it's clean, I'm like, wow, thanks whoever did this. Um, so coming back from that, knitting together civilization requires that we let go of some of these grudges and that we shake up this long-term memory. It requires us to make good decisions going forward. And that's one that seems to be super duper challenging right now. But re-knitting things, repairing things, like that's the sign of civilization. And that's what I think about when I think about cellular memory, long memory, that sort of thing.
You took me down so many paths with that.
Not
Because I always think about, look, okay, I have about 3 thoughts that I want to mention, and
Yeah.
one of them has to do with the nodes, because I've
Yes.
seen some postulation of the North Node ruling Virgo.
Interesting.
But Virgo and excess.
You know what's so, yeah, right. It would have to be, oh gosh, why do I see it as aspirational? I bet it's not, but that whole sense of like, the North Node is where I'm going. You know what I mean? Like I could see that because what Virgo wants isn't attainable on this earth, which is a perfection that never changes and shifts. And here we are in this super chaotic world. And so I could see that yearning for that thing is part of like that characteristic from an evolutionary standpoint. But you have a really good point about it's not an excess.
Yeah, and I mean,
And then I've
yeah, I
heard
don't know. I have to think
Chiron as Virgos,
yeah, I've heard
the
that
wounded
too.
healer,
I like that a bit more.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I
It's
like that a bit
interesting.
more. And so back to, I have a thing about Uranus that I want to go to, but I want to go back to, you said something about um looking at goddesses and cleaning your house. Now, did you come up with someone?
Yeah, there were a few names. The one I landed on was Civilization, but I have it in a journal. I'll find it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a
Because
name
right
of
away I
them.
went to Hygeia. That's
And
because
see,
about the purification and all that, right?
yeah, I think so. It's one of the, is it a muse or it is one of the, is it a relative of Hygeias? I don't think so. I'll have to look it up because it's not springing to mind.
Okay.
Hygeia I love because she just has so many beautiful, she's one of the sisters, and is
I
she
think so.
Asclepius's, why can't I say his name?
Asclepius.
Thank you.
Asclepius. I
Asclepius.
think it's
But
tomato,
he had
tomato.
like 8 daughters who like do amazing things, and
Yes.
we hardly know about them. And
I feel like Hygeia was the one who he trained, like she was the one that
yeah,
kind of got his gifts.
that I think you're right. They all had a quality of healing. One is just good health, right? Who wouldn't
Yeah.
want that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was less about, I mean, I think it's about the repair of the home, right? Like I definitely walk around, and if something's out of place, I put it together. And if you irritate me, I'll line things up on a table. You know what I mean? Like I will start kind of wanting things to be a certain width apart. But
This is the cue for everybody to go grab your natal chart and find
that's
out where
right.
Virgo is.
Exactly. And also, speaking on that note, I did want to put it out there that there are myriad of calculators to determine your south node. And you can find them online. And if we find one in particular, we'll make it available to you guys. Put up a post on Facebook or something like that. But yeah, to find where your stuff is, I, I I have a hesitance to talk about my own chart, but only a little bit. People will have to weigh in if they've heard too much. But my Virgo, my let me take a step back. My Mars, how I activate myself, is in Virgo, and it's conjunct Pluto and Uranus, and it's just going and going and going and going and going and going. So there are definitely times when I want a powerful clean, Hercules cleaning the stables kind of action. But the repair piece, there's another concept. I tried it actually, and it's really quite sweet. Kintsugi, which is the Japanese repairing with this gold,
I love it.
so
Yeah.
beautiful. And so
Filling the cracks with gold.
so that where things have broken, they become more valuable and not less valuable. And I've done that, and it was so sweet because I had received a gift. I used to work at a parrot sanctuary, and someone brought me this gift of a little cute bird hanging from a wire. And my husband came to me one day and went, I didn't mean to, and it's in pieces, and I am so sorry. And we just sat down together and like put this gold epoxy on that mimics the kintsugi, and now it's just adorable. And it was so easy. I was like, thank you for giving me a chance to tell you about this cool idea. And that's the vibe of the house, right? That I'm looking for. That's the like, oh my God, look at those dishes. They're so cute. Let's get them done. And it's a terrible habit because, what most people do is push through and get it done anyway, have no choice. And I'm always like, no, 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 it's super fun. No one would do it if we were all having to push through. This is super unusual, this hustle culture, this weird stuff. So look for the fun. But anyway, long story short, the house cleaning goddess is one that restores civilization by like, if she were around today, she'd be fixing lawnmowers, or she'd be, before you open your Christmas decor, she would be the one checking all the lights if you have lights for the tree and that sort of thing. And I love that, right? Because it's the very moment where we decide to be civil. It's in our own homes.
That's true. That's very true. Hmm.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to go back to was this idea of the Uranus and Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about memory, we can't forget about the moon because it's a huge piece of
Yeah,
our how memory operates in our chart, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. But when I think about the Mercury and the Uranus, Uranus being the higher octave kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, it's even, in medical astrology, Mercury is our sympathetic nervous system.
Wow.
Uranus is the parasympathetic nervous system,
Wow.
right?
That's neat.
And so when I think about this idea of Mercury and processing information, and memory and all of this, it's like now Uranus is collectively taking what we've learned individually and sifting through to create a collective processing of information and a collective memory, right?
Yes, I would argue the same.
Yeah. And so because of that, I wouldn't say that Uranus memory could be counted on.
Interesting.
Ah,
Interesting. Well, I
yeah.
think from the standpoint of it holding like trauma, grudges, and also the good stuff we've done, it's the same pickle. It's the same dang pickle. It's the
Yeah.
limits of what we can know, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
If you think
So,
about what happens when the collective gets a hold of things.
right?
Yeah, it gets a bit warped, or it
What
can,
is
not
the
always, but I think it can get a bit warped
Well,
sometimes.
what's one of the ones I've seen this often on either Instagram or Facebook where they say, remember when we used to think not having the information was the problem? And that once we had the information, it would be smooth sailing. And here we are, like super not smooth
Yeah.
sailing.
I remember seeing something not that long ago, very similar, but it was like we thought we'd get smarter. We have not.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a
Yes.
fascinating thing. And yet we live like, if we have any privilege, we live like emperors and empresses. And, if we can get our hands on like good food and a place to live, like it's an extraordinary time to be alive. But yeah, so so that idea of the nodes being a connection to the past and a connection to the future versus being sort of a more chaotic resonance, right? It's a interesting two different things. One that I'll really have to mull on. I started looking into the eclipse material too. I thought I had, I'm sure you've got a bunch of books lying around too. I thought I had like Bernadette Brady's perfect little discussion about eclipses, and this is about chaos theory and
Oh,
why it helps make astrology a really foundational way to perceive the world. Not at all about eclipses. So I have to go back and look that up, because I really am trying to supplement what I've already got, what we've already got with, this vast community that we have that is really exciting, doing really exciting things, So
yeah.
yeah.
And the nodes do hold a really powerful key to what we've got going on. And not just in our natal charts, but they're always really valuable when somebody's working with mundane or, horror-y. They're always telling an important story. Um, but yeah, they're just so powerful. I'm still trying to wrap my head around in when you get musical instruments that are attuned to astrological placements. So, there's the planetary tuning forks, which are, taking the rotation of that planet and bringing it to a sound that we can hear.
Yeah.
There are nodal tuning forks.
Man, for
I
the notes.
know.
Yes, of course. You've told me about those. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have them. Um, they're not part of the system that I've been trained on. But this whole idea around the nodes being the absence of sound, like I've become kind of obsessed with this idea around the nodes, the forks, the absence of sound, and how this whole thing, like how that all ties in some weird way. And I haven't gotten
Yeah.
there yet, but it's
You
like it's a
know,
place that I keep wandering off to. I'm like, I know I'm gonna get this. I know there's gonna
yeah.
be something
Well,
that
it reminds me of, I'm studying piano, and the latest sort of angle on piano has been understanding how to transpose using orchestra clefs. So the regular two clefs that everybody sees all the time, that's the notation, that's one specific orientation, and then sort of visually how to do it just by moving this one piece, which is crazy. It's like blowing my mind, and I keep playing around with it, and I haven't ingested it completely, although I practice it every day. But the key things that I'm getting, and this practice, I mean, I work so slowly. I'm so glad that you met me later in life, because it has just sort of taken this long period of time to kind of come to a place of contentment with my work. But my practice is the same for all of the things that I do. So it's the same for piano. And what I'm trying to get to is we play the rests over and over, and we try not to cheat the rests. And when we talk about, that absence of sound, we talk about negative space in art, and how if you don't have negative space in art, there's kind of a sense of claustrophobia, and how critical it is, how for some pieces the silences are more important than the notes that get played. And so there's a similarity there. I can see where you would be playing around with it. And then I just don't know the nodes of music. I can ask about it, but I feel like I'll come back with like electric static in my hair and like my eyes shooting little lasers, because she'll have blown my mind again.
well, and when you're talking about this whole absence of, in art, the absence,
Yeah.
empty spaces, right away I started thinking about empty houses in our natal
Yes.
chart, and how people become really obsessed when they're first learning, and oh my God, I
Yes.
don't have anything in the first house. Like,
Yes.
does that mean that I don't, there's no substance to me, or,
Right.
there's nothing in my seventh house. Am I never going to have a relationship? Like, it's
Yeah.
panic around having an empty house. And
Yeah.
I think we're so conditioned to fill everything, fill the space with sound,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that the absence is so important. And especially, do you really want every single one of the houses in your chart activated?
Well, and well, I don't know. That reminds me of jigsaw puzzles. I never played them as a kid, or as a young adult. And so now when I play them, I explain patiently to my husband, who would like me to just get the puzzle done, how I win over and over and over at jigsaws. So the first way I win is I flip them all over so that you can see the surface of the image. And so on. If I connect any two, I have won yet again. Usually he gets through 75% of the puzzle before I'm actually diving in to do stuff. But yeah, yes.
The absence.
I think it's something that we miss. Pardon me. I'm actually kind of coming up with Amanda. I can't remember Amanda's last name. I'll find it and sort of flash it under. Did a whole bunch of work on receiving and how, it's better to give than it is to receive. Says who? And not learning how to receive means when you ask for help, you rebuff the help that comes. And when there's a need, perhaps you like blow it out of proportion, that it's something that can't be carried along with. And so there were a whole bunch of practices she had that led to letting go. I'll give an example of one of the things that she said is not receiving and is not rest, that I did all the time. I love my brain's, alive with thought, and I love to just sit and watch it spark. And I cultivate strategies and I think about opportunities, and that's not resting, it turns out. Strategizing is not resting, even if you aren't writing it down. And, she has like a receiving journal that I've kind of looked at, and I think I've given copies of her books to like a half a dozen
You gave
people.
me a copy of your book.
Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Because, in Sufism, they say, I'm sure it's not just Sufism, I'm sure it's elsewhere. You can have an open hand or you can have a fist. And if you leave your hand as a fist, there is just war. And if you leave your hand open, there's just emptiness. And so it's in this transition back and forth, and how we use things that they make the most sense. And I've lost my point again. Woohoo!
Giving and receiving.
Really,
I-
really important. And so this is where the silence in music and the letting go of things because of the South Node come into play. Because, we cannot move forward and integrate new things and come up with new systems unless we take apart the old. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the end of a cycle, no matter what the cycle is, that you are going to take apart the thing that you cherished and loved and put your whole life into. And sometimes you're going to get to do it all over again. And sometimes somebody else is going to get to do it with your stuff because you're leaving it behind. And so, it really is real that as human beings, we go through several of those cycles. It's not the era where folks are kind of sitting still and not moving. So understanding that we can let go and where the excesses occur would definitely create better outcome. We could have much better choices. But yeah, the book that I was referring to on receiving was entirely about emptying out, and entirely about, how we can interact with each other in a more valuable way. So
It's an interesting time to have that type of a conversation, just because I think that with everybody experiencing Chiron and Aries right now, especially when you were talking about asking for help,
yeah.
This came up in my mind, because I know with Chiron and Aries, if you have that placement natally, like a lot of us do,
Mhm.
that perhaps, learning to not do everything for yourself is one of the lessons.
Yeah.
And something that we are, I think, all struggling with, this idea around independence and doing everything for ourselves while Chiron is transiting Aries at this time. I also feel like it's going to be a huge part of the eclipses and what we've got moving forward as well, right? Because the North Node is going to connect with Chiron.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about this more
Yeah. But let's get
next,
into it a little bit.
next.
Yeah.
But the idea of what we've talked about today
Mhm.
with this North Node being an excess, if
Yeah.
we look at it from that point of view, what does that mean when we have Chiron joining the North Node for a really long time?
Well, the
You
first
know,
question I have is like, do you consider, like, I've seen a lot of insecurity around Aries, and I know that's not a typical thing, and it's not, I bring it up almost because it's not the same as I've seen in other signs. When I think about Aries, I think about being very present, very in the now, so much so that whatever's going on now is going to go on forever and ever and ever, no matter what. And, I think about passion, and I think about not having to consider other people's, thoughts and ideas. And then I think about, and I know I said Aries, but the reason why is because with Chiron in Aries, there is this very interesting insecurity that I kind of feel with my spidey sense that is not like, what I love about Aries is try to drop your weird crap on them. Try. Go ahead. Here's my weird stuff. Poof, gone. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a sign that takes kindly to people dumping on them. And what I love about that is there's fresh action and courage and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, the insecurity that I feel around that is the insecurity that comes from being that, I don't know, self-motivated. What I'm trying to say is from outside. It's not, it's hardly ever, here's how I feel inside. It's almost always somebody either in real life has come and like, you're terrible, blah, 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 or they've pulled it up from some other source. Um, and it's a standout because, again, I don't really think of Aries as a sign that tackles, insecurity. Maybe more
yeah,
pushes
well,
it off a
it's
cliff.
tough because I think that when Aries is, anybody who's got strong Aries placements, when they're feeling that kind of insecurity, I think they just go off to be by themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I just
It
think for
wouldn't be a
myself,
communal experience. That makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe the perceiving that you've got right now is because we have that with shared Chiron and Aries experience. And so that
Wow.
insecurity is palpable because we're sharing it on a collective level.
So if that's going to increase, right? I mean, the standard ones are, war, right? Or dominion. Uh, And so if that comes to excess, we certainly are grappling with multiple situations around the world, including, I would say, climate change to the extent that people are trying to find a spot of land to live on, and kind of running through everybody else's land, quote unquote. Um, yeah, I would think there would be more of that kind of aggression coming, more of that kind of, you know, insecurity for folks who have it in their charts. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Like a seaweed wrap day is what I would say. April 8th, everybody go get a seaweed wrap. Like, nourish your body. Stay out of the stars.